Ikajikwi. My name is Harmony. My ancestral name is Selakis, and I'm from the Tla'amin Nation. And with my partner Hannes, we have supported the self-governing Indigenous governments to create a set of community well-being tools that are very practical and support our governments to do the work that they want to do to gather and use their own data in accordance with their own worldviews to support their functions of governance. So today I am going to be talking about the data governance framework tool. I'm going to share my screen. When we enter into the site, we consider the protocol and the ownership of this work as belonging to the self-governing Indigenous governments and treat that with respect and honor the work that they've done to make these resources available to all. We go to the Applied Tools tab and we find the data governance framework. What is this tool? What is data governance? It seems so mysterious, right? But it really is just, what is our program for holding data, owning data, using data, applying data, caretaking our data? And so this tool is essentially just like, it's a fairly high level framework that allows for just, I think, bringing all of the threads of data governance together in a single visual and allowing for the continuous improvement of a data governance program. What sets this tool apart from other data governance tools? Like, one is I do think this group of self-governing Indigenous governments worked hard to make this feel like real life. Like, this is simple, real life stuff. This isn't some abstract, nerdy thing that only some people understand, that needs a lot of training and that the rest of us are never allowed to be part of. Like, this is part of our job as governments. And so let's make it easy for all of us to understand and to support and uphold our responsibilities around. So let's take a look at the tool itself. This visual here is really the core part of what this framework is about. One of the participants in our working group process right away has called this the drum, that this is our data governance drum. It's the thing that grounds us. It keeps us balanced in our data governance program. It keeps us whole. It keeps us connected. And so what you see in this drum is really the visual depiction of all of the components of what we see as the framework. It's all presented in this circle, like I said, because these things are all interconnected. You can't pull a piece out and it doesn't exist on its own. This is why frameworks are helpful, is that we want to think of all things at once. And that doesn't mean we need to be focused on everything all at the same time. It just means that we understand that we're making choices about where we're investing our time and energy in building our data governance program while seeing the big picture. So if we unpack the framework, we see the center of this drum is the core purpose of a data governance program. In this framework, this is expressed as like, we have the right to express our data sovereignty through the ownership, use, and protection of quality data. It's the point of what we're trying to do as governments in the use of our data. It is the grounding touchstone for all of the other aspects of a data governance program. It's the why. Then around the center are 4 core components of a data governance program. We have vision, goals, and principles. These are like what guides us conceptually. Where is it we ultimately want to go? And what are the core beliefs that guide how we show up? Then there's laws, policies, and procedures. These are like the core rules of the game here in data governance. So like, this is often our must-dos and our must-don'ts in the work that we do in data. There are roles, responsibilities, and processes. We think about things like, well, who in our system is responsible ultimately for ensuring the protection of privacy? Who do we go to when we've had a breach of privacy, for example? What are the ways in which we make decisions about, say, use of data and sharing of data with external partners? Then we have monitoring, reporting, and evaluation. And that's, how do we know our program is working? Are we gathering any operational metrics? Are we getting together every year to be like, how is it going in data governance? Like, what is our process to ensure that we are continuing to grow and mature our program? Then around those four components are the data lifecycle, the key elements within an overall lifecycle of data. So we gather data, we collect it. We caretake it, right? We take care of it. We ensure that it is of good quality. We make sure that it is protected from unintended disclosure, that people's personal information is treated as sacred. Then there's use. We're not there to gather it and just hold it. We're there to use it. And often this is where we kind of get stuck and we don't use it enough because we're afraid of maybe unintentionally breaching someone's privacy, or we think we're not allowed. And so this is about, well, we balance that with the collective in our worldview, and we need to understand how well things are working for all of our people. And so this is about active use of the data we hold. And then archive. How long are we holding on to these data and why? Some things we hold on to forever and some things we really shouldn't. So this is guidance for like, how do we decide when we are putting something away versus when we are saying goodbye to it? And the tool outlines each of these stages in more detail. And then the outer ring of our drum here represents the 4 internal and external factors that really shape a program. And that's why these arrows are kind of pointing in towards the middle here. It's because these things either like enable us or they constrain us. And we have an opportunity to nudge those things in ways that we intend. So one of those is people. So to what degree do we have the staffing capacity in place to do this type of work? Systems, what are the technologies that we're using to support our work in data? Partners, are we harnessing external partners to help us with our work? Are there demands from external partners that are driving our data governance in certain directions? And then organization and just the organizational culture. Do we have a culture of evidence-based decision-making, of use of data, of protection of data? What is the culture and the temperature within the organization about data? So this is kind of like we see all the parts together. And so we consider things like how our organizational culture might shape the way in which we design our roles and responsibilities and processes. We might think about how the laws and policies and procedures we adopt are designed to shift the environment with external partners and communicate to them clearly what our rules are about use and collection of data about us and our territories and our identity. So that's how all of this kind of comes together and helps us think about the whole while focusing on component parts. Now, what the rest of the tool does is in a very consistent way. Each section of the tool is consistently for each of these areas unpacks the same key questions. One of those questions is, what is this? Like, what are we talking about? Then why? Why is it relevant? Why does this matter to us? What do we need to think about? What do we need to consider in this area? And then in the tool, we kind of like provide like multiple ways and multiple tips for SGIGs to consider in doing work in that area. Then like, what does good look like? And in my way of thinking, it's kind of like, what does good enough look like? Because each of us need to make choices. We're not perfect on all things, and no one has a perfect data governance program. So it's kind of like you need to pick like what is good enough for us for now based on where we are today and what our current priorities are. So let's go to one so I can show you what I mean. So let's use vision, goals, and principles. So what is it? What are we talking about? We're talking about the overarching guidance and thought leadership for data governance. Often this is captured in a clear strategic statement that describes the current or describes that future state that we're progressing towards in our data governance work and the key cross-cutting factors that guide our decision making. That's often what principles are about. Help us think about how we make decisions, the things we need to think about. Why is it relevant? Because it is the core of our beliefs. This should express where we want to go and how we think about it. It establishes like the key cultural values or articulates the key cultural values that we might have. What do we need to think about when designing vision, goals, and principles? Well, one for me, it's like, this can demystify. Like I said, not everybody. Data can be very off-putting. People can think, that's not for me. I don't have the skills. I don't have the background for that. And so I think that a data governance vision and principles, some clear goals, can really help us understand how we're all part of this work and to make it easy for all of us to put our hand up and be involved. And so when drafting that, we should be thinking about how do we engage people in that work with us? How do we write this in ways that aren't alienating for people, but are using our real life language that we use every day in our organizations? And then when we have that in place, how are we repeat so that that becomes part of organizational culture and is tied in to all of our other briefings, plans, and strategies? The other thing to think about when designing a vision, goals, principles is that we often already have a vision statement that's tied to our like broader plans that we might have as governments. So like think about the right terminology to use. If you don't want to have two vision statements, don't call it something else. Like use the right language that works for you. But the idea here is tie your plans together in a strategic way and use the right terminology for you. There's also lots out there. So something else to consider if you're drafting a vision principles is our people have a long history of doing this work together. We have many resources, many principles, many examples out there that we can draw from. What does good look like? Well, like here's a couple of points. Like we have something in place. We have a vision, we have goals, we have a principles. These are endorsed by leadership. And this is really key. Like it's something we get asked a lot is, how do I get leadership on board with this work? And so having leadership involved in the development and championship of these principles is one way in which we know like we're on the right track, and that there is a strong commitment from leadership and senior management to do this work. For each of these, we have a little scenario that is the storytelling component of the tool. So it's like, okay, Harmony, you have your like lists, like you and Hannes have developed all of these bullet points and check boxes, and we can refer to those, but like make it real for me in the context in which I work. And so for each of these, we've designed a little scenario or a story, all based on the Salingatuq government, to try to speak to people who learn better through interacting with story. And so in this case, we've said that the Salingatuq government has done the work inside of its organization because they want to develop a data-driven culture, to develop a vision, goals, and principles for data governance. And we've described examples of where they've landed in terms of their vision. You can see here, they govern and protect all of their data and information wherever it resides. So not just the data that they have, but they're asserting here, any other government or organization or researcher or academic institution who owns data about our identity, our people, our territory belongs to us. And we have an interest in enabling those data for our potential and for our uses. And we want to use that as a strategic asset to spur action on our end that ultimately benefits the well-being of the people we care about. So to do that, they've articulated 3 goals. They want to increase their data holdings, and not just any random data holdings, the data holdings that specifically are aligned with their worldview and with their goals. They want to promote the active use of data in decision-making and accountability throughout their government. And they want to create and maintain practical policies and processes that hit that sweet spot between active data use and privacy and confidentiality. And so to achieve that, they have a set of principles here. They govern all of their data regardless of where it lives. All analyses and publications will be culturally appropriate and reflect our worldview. So this tells us, for example, if I'm working in the lands department and I'm working with an external researcher who wants to do a project that will serve us, we need to make sure that we are working hand in hand with that researcher to ensure that all of the findings are presented from our worldview. Data will have an actionable benefit. So we don't say yes to things unless we think it matters to us. Data are treated in a secure and protected manner. The government will promote like it to actually possess all of its own data wherever it possibly can. First and foremost, government will protect the privacy of individual Salingatuk members, and the data will be of quality. And so they've defined quality here. It's accurate, it's reliable, it's clear, it's comparable, it's timely, and it's coherent. So what that would tell me, if I was working in the kind of data team, for example, I would say, oh, okay, for each of these, these are the dimensions of what quality means. And so for each of these, I would describe, okay, what does accurate look like? It probably means that we have very consistent ways of ensuring we capture people's name, birth date, etc., in accurate ways, that it's reliable. We always do that in the same way. It's always month, day, year, for example, and so on, right? So for each of these, we would have like a set of things within the data department that would cascade from this principle. So you'll see that that's just one section of this framework. And for each of these components of our drum, we've unpacked this very basic definition and very basic guidance that enable the self-governing Indigenous governments to understand each of these components, balance them against each other, and to dig deep into the areas of priority for them and hopefully give them some good starting point that, again, I think is a very good companion with the data capacity assessment and planning tool that exists. So folks that are using this tool should also be referring to that other tool, which is the subject of a different webinar. And that is the overview of the data governance tool.
I mean, yeah, excellent presentation and again, and just excellent material. One thing that I'd like to just say is that this is one of these things where we've tried a number of times to get this thing off the ground. I think where we're going to have to start is that, and this is just, and I'd like your comment on this, is that I feel that it's just not embedded in the organization in a actual practical sense, in that, you know, you could say, well, whose job description is it in?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Or whose job is it to do
Mm-hmm.
this? Someone has to do this. And this seems to be a practical question which we're facing, and I would love to hear any comments you might have about that, or any experience perhaps that you or others have had on that. Thanks.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's something that I have struggled with, and I think that I have ultimately kind of like changed my own perspective on through time, like by doing. And that I think that like in the past, I've kind of come at this work from a perspective of like a frameworky one, right? Like, here's your overall framework, like, where are you at? Where do you want to go? And it's just like such an abstract way to go about it. It's not real for people. And people are like, what does this matter to my day-to-day life? And so what I've found, and then the other way I've done this is like, okay, well, let's gather all of the data you already have, your administrative data, and inventory that and start using that as your starting point. And it's hard to get people jazzed about it. The data are of bad quality. This is the legacy we've inherited, right? Like these patchwork systems and like different data sets we've got that are non-comparable. The best success I've had so far in my career in this work is honestly by self-governing, or by any nation just being like, we're going to do a data collection exercise and we're going to use that to organize ourselves in data. And we are going to then develop a culture of evidence-based decision-making by using that data set. So like the biggest success I've had in this is like at the beginning of this one project I ran, I was like, this is my mission. Like seeing if like we can actually embed this in the organization was like, I was like, success looks like at the end of this, if leadership says, what do the census say? Or what do the data say? And at the end of that project, we got there. So it wasn't just like, but it was a specific data set because they had gone through a project to collect those data. And then at the end, we changed their briefing note templates and stuff that was going to leadership. So it was like, you know, evidence in support of this recommendation. And there was like kind of these prompts where people in the organization needed to document, like, okay, these are what the data say, like prompting that thinking. And leadership would say, well, what do the data say? What do the census say? So that was successful in terms of capacity in that incident, or in that instance. We're still kind of one leg in, one leg out with that particular nation where they have done, like started to build a bit of capacity to use their own data. And we have given them the data visualization tool that is one of the other tools here. And so at the desk, their people are able to just use their own data. They don't have to make a data access request. On the back end, we are still managing, though, as an external consultant, managing some of the infrastructure behind that. And maybe the next time they run their census, they'll be in a position to take the whole thing. But it is incremental. The only success where I felt like truly like, okay, we've made a meaningful shift here has been when we have a focal project that's kind of pulling organizational change and pulling some capacity through on a tangible thing.